Okay. Um, Welcome to those of you that are joining us live, and to those of you that are watching the replay, miigwech. You're welcome to share our podcast here, and I appreciate that. Well, this is, I think, episode 11. So I've developed a practice, or I'm developing a practice of reading this amazing piece of writing that I found by Mickey Scott B. Jones. It's called An Invitation to a Brave Space. And I really invite you to hear what she has to say. Together, we will create brave space because there is no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. So this morning, so grateful that Heather Ginter, my friend Heather Ginter, has agreed to join us on the podcast here, and she's going to be sharing her story of. Well, I don't want to put labels on your story, so I'm just going to invite you to introduce yourself, Heather. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Joan, for having me on your show. I'm really excited to be here. This is my first podcast, so I'm not sure exactly what the protocol is, but my name is Heather Ginter, and my story. Well, I wrote a memoir about my story, and it's called "When Forever Is Interrupted." And it's really about my love story with my late husband, and I felt very compelled to write it. I couldn't not write it because I felt it was an important story to tell, and if it helps one person, then it that's going through something similar, then it is absolutely worth it. And yeah, I guess I don't know, start from the beginning a little bit.
Sure. Before we do, Heather, I'm noticing something about Heather and I are both technologically challenged. So, welcome to our world. So, I realize I can see your whole face beautifully. But when I look down at the bar here, the Heather Ginter is right across your face. So,
Oh, okay,
yeah, there you go. Okay.
okay.
I think a little back
Is that
there.
is
Perfect.
that better?
I think you
Okay.
got it now.
Okay,
Okay.
great. I'll have to
Perfect.
hold it up a little bit, but it is what it is.
Oh, okay.
My laptop just decided it didn't want to participate in this podcast, so I'm on my phone. It is what it is, but it's,
Take it.
yeah, okay. I see
Okay.
that little. Okay, now I
Yeah.
see.
Okay.
Now I
Perfect.
see what
You
other
got it.
people see. Perfect.
You got it.
Okay,
Okay. All right.
so a little bit about myself. I was born in Ontario, Kitchener, Ontario, and I was born to a teen mom, and I was then adopted when I was about 8 weeks old. Um, when I was about two, we moved to Steinbach, Manitoba, and that's where I grew up. I have an older brother. I grew up in a very loving home, not really a religious one. I grew up with some mixed messages about religion, but I had a good home. My dad was an alcoholic, and so my parents did end up splitting up when I was about 17 due to that. So that was a difficult part. Absolutely. Um, and then when I was about when I was about 20, I was at the University of Winnipeg, and I was studying my Bachelor of Arts in English and French. And that is about when I met my husband, Ernie. And I met him through friends. And yeah, that's when our journey together started. I was 20, he was 26. He was divorced. He grew up in Paraguay, South America.
Paraguay.
Paraguay.
That's so interesting. Can you kind of segue in there and tell people what he was doing in Paraguay?
Sure. So it's a bit of a history, but his parents were born in Manitoba, but in 1926 or so, around there, a large group of Mennonites wanted to have their own school. They wanted to have their own, German language in school, and their own, religious in school. So Paraguay offered them land in Chaco to develop, and so a large group of Mennonites moved to Paraguay, and started some little towns there.
Hmm.
And Ernie's dad was about 5 years old, so he was one of the first, kind of settlers there.
Hmm.
And so, excuse me, my husband grew up with many siblings. He was one of 15 kids.
Wow.
He was number 13. He always said lucky 13. Anyways, and that's in sharp contrast with my family. I only have one brother, right? So that's where he grew up, and he moved to Canada when he married, and moved to Canada when he was about 21, and had two small kids, and then he divorced his first wife. Him and his first wife divorced, and a couple years later, I came onto the scene. So that's how that started. So when I met Ernie, he had two sweet little kids. They were age 4 and 5 at the
Hmm.
time, and yeah, I'm proud to say that I am a stepmom to two wonderful grown kids.
Nice.
So
So I have a copy of Heather's book that she graciously sent me that I'm reading. I'm about halfway through now, but it's called When Forever is Interrupted. So those of you just tuning in, that's what we're talking about is Heather's book. And why did you call it that?
so I called it When Forever is Interrupted. Be like when I met Ernie, excuse me, I was only 20. I was still in university, and I was always like doodling. I'm a doodler, and I was always writing Ernie and Heather forever, right? That kind of stuff, because Heather and forever kind of rhyme, right? And I was always doodling that in my notebooks, right? And so, well, many years later, when he developed cancer and ultimately passed away from that, spoiler alert, um, uh, I felt like our forever was interrupted. But because I'm a Christian, I do believe I will see him again. So that's why I feel like it's just interrupted for now.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
So we were talking about why you chose to write the book.
Yes. So I'll just I guess I'll just finish a little bit about
Sure.
our story together. So as I said, I was young when I met him, and we married about 5 years later in 1997. And the cover of the book is interesting because it was actually, that's actually a painting that Ernie and I received for a wedding gift from a family friend that she painted for us. So that couple on the beach is supposed to be Ernie and myself. So I thought that was a perfect picture for the cover as well. Excuse me. And we had a good life. I was lucky enough to marry my best friend. I could. He was a great guy. He was extremely talkative. He was very funny, and I could tell him everything. And he just really had my back. He was a great husband, and I was lucky to be with him for almost 26 years. And I feel blessed that I had that long with him, although it was certainly not nearly long enough. But yeah, we when he turned 40, he decided to do something interesting, and he followed his dream and opened his own yard care business. And he then became a very successful arborist. And we had a great life. We moved to the country, and he opened, well, near Lockport, not really the country, but and he had this great successful yard care business, and he was an amazing arborist. And in 2017, he was diagnosed with gallstones, like lots of people have, right? He had a really strong gallstone attack, and I raced him to the hospital and all this. And they're like, oh, it's gallstones. And we were in the middle of, we had just literally planned our trip, a dream trip to Costa Rica to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. And then it was going to be happening in a few weeks. And then our very kind family doctor said, you're not going to miss this trip because of gallstones. So I'm going to try to get you into surgery to get your gallbladder removed, so you don't have to miss this trip, because we certainly didn't want to have a gallbladder removed in Costa Rica, right? So, and that's what happened. Within a few weeks, he had his gallbladder removed, and it went well. The doctor said it was a little inflamed, but very big gallstones, and everything was just wonderful. And we went on this trip to Costa Rica. We met some fantastic people on this trip. We were on a bus tour for a week, and we met these wonderful friends, Donna and Scott, who I remain close friends to this day. They were from Chicago area. Anyways, it was just this amazing trip. I can't begin to tell you how wonderful it was. 2 weeks in Costa Rica. And but he had some lingering pain from where his gallbladder was removed. And I had to be in charge of lifting all the suitcases that trip, because he wasn't supposed to carry anything heavy, that kind of thing. Anyways, but we're like, oh, I thought, you know what? I wonder if he gave himself a hernia. Probably overdid it, right? And anyways, we came home. We had to go through Toronto. This was like in winter. March, and two snowflakes in Toronto, and our flight got delayed, and we came home at 4 a.m. and went straight to bed. And we woke up the next day, and we were having our mate, which is a South American tea that we drank every morning. And I noticed a flashing message on our answering machine, and I played it, and we didn't get that many messages on our home phone those days much. Anyways, it was from his surgeon, and just said, oh, hi, I'm just calling to see how you're doing from your gallbladder surgery. Oh, you're probably still on your trip. Give me a call when you're back, kind of thing. And that surgeon was just the kindest man ever. And we're like, oh, isn't that sweet that he calls to see how we're doing? Yeah. So doctors don't call just to say hi. Anyways, so Ernie was on the phone with the doctor, and I was updating Facebook with pictures of my fabulous trip. And I go back into the kitchen, and he's sitting at the kitchen table, and he's white as a ghost. And he said, unbeknownst to us, they send away body parts for routine testing, I guess. I don't know. No one ever told us that was going to happen. And he said, the doctor said they found cancer in my gallbladder. And I was like, well, what? What does that mean? And like, the gallbladder's gone. What's the problem, right? But there was a problem. When they took out that gallbladder, they cut accidentally. Unbeknownst to them, there was cancer. Even the pathologist didn't think there was cancer. It looked normal, but they cut through cancer. And so what happens when you cut through cancer? It spreads. But we were told, this was caught early. You're so lucky this is never caught early. And that began our journey into his diagnosis with a very, very rare form of cancer. So it was extremely difficult, to say the least. He was an extremely healthy man, really healthy man, except for one hernia surgery. He just didn't have health issues, and so it was a real struggle. Um, and night one, I couldn't stop shaking, and that's when I started turning to alcohol to calm my nerves. And yeah, that is how I coped. And it wasn't enough. Soon I was on anti-anxiety pills, and I combined them to try to cope. And I was soon in counseling because my doctor was concerned about me, and my counselor suggested journaling, and that's when I began journaling obsessively about our journey with his cancer. And I wrote everything down. Conversations with doctors, you name it. I wrote it all down. I probably did. I wish I would have written like what time of day I was doing it, because it was probably middle of the night because I wasn't sleeping well. But I wrote it in excruciatingly details, and that's what the book is based on. Is on my journals.
So I'm reading through your book now, and it is like it does take me there to the moment with you when I'm reading, um, and some of what you haven't shared yet around the like the shock and the heartbreak around the diagnosis and the way the medical system treated you. Like some some doctors were like compassionate, like you just described, but I'm getting the feeling that most aren't really set up there to be nice to anybody, and or they're underfunded and or things aren't
Yeah,
be supportive.
we really struggled with the medical system. So soon after the diagnosis, we were sent to a specialty surgeon who was going to try to fix his bile duct. And so I'm not a doctor. I don't know all these technical stuff, but we were sent to this doctor, and he was ridiculously blunt. And he said, hopefully I don't have to open you up. And if the cancer spread, then I'll just close you up and it's chemo only for you, kind of thing. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. So the surgery was unsuccessful. The cancer had spread. We only had to wait maybe 3 or 4 weeks for the surgery, but that was a lifetime to wait.
Mm,
And since now it had been a couple months since his gallbladder surgery, so now we were 2 months into it, and the cancer spread too quickly, and so now it was chemo only. And we were devastated. My very, very relaxed, happy husband, positive husband, like that person was gone for a while. And then I had to be the strong one, which is kind of like a joke because I'm not a strong person. But in that situation, I had to be. And so a niece and nephew of ours that we were very close to suggested we go to attend their church shortly after that surgery. And I really had to coax Ernie into going. So he was raised religiously and had been baptized. But I hadn't. We had attended church sometimes, but on special occasions like Christmas and stuff. But that specific sermon, that service, it was like 2 times during the service I whispered to Ernie, does the pastor know you're sick? Because it sounded like it was directed at us.
Mm.
And Ernie's like, well, no, it was a big congregation and we hadn't met that pastor yet. And I was just overwhelmed. And band played the song and it just resonated with me so much. And I had been struggling throughout a lot of my specifically married life, if I was worthy of God's love. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's how I felt, that I wasn't good enough for God. You know, I'd been a bad person or whatever. And it just helped me so much, that one service. And it really gave us some peace.
Mm.
And so, and at that time we were still clinging to some hope
Mm.
that he was we were going to beat it. And our oncologist, although really nice, was very vague. And in fact, in my book, I nickname him Dr. Vague, because we didn't know half the time what he was really talking about. And we were just clinging to hope that he was going to beat it.
Mhm.
And so he did a couple rounds of chemo, did really well. Um, but and then our first scan, we called it, like I always called it, scary scan result day. And before those scary appointments, I would have to have a couple drinks to calm down. And I remember our first one, and I had this, me and my doodling, I was doodling. We were waiting for this doctor to come in and tell us how his first scan had gone. And I was scribbling, please God, heal him, save
Mm.
him, help us. And I was scribbling it over and over and over, like, and it was just screaming in my head, please God, save him. And Ernie was glancing over at me like, what are you doing here? And he was like back to his optimistic self, and he was determined he was going to beat it. He was determined. And our normally serious oncologist walked in and said, he smiled and he said, I have good news. The cancer's almost gone. And that gave us some much needed hope. But unfortunately, there was complications after that and all sorts of things. So yeah, it was I call it like, we kind of had a journey back to
Before you
God.
move before you move on to the next part of your journey, I'm not finished reading your book yet, but where
Oh,
what I've read, I was really struck by how, um, like how you were impacted by well-meaning people. People coming when you go out and about, and people want to know what's going on, and then they're like, well, can you talk about that a bit? Like how that was for you?
yeah. It was interesting, and I know now everybody was very well meaning. But I also discovered we told way too many people.
Um,
And well meaning people, like I remember one time in one day, 13 times I had to go over my story. And I think number 13, I kind of freaked out on her, right? Ran into somebody, how's Ernie doing? And I probably just freaked, right? Because it is really hard to go over that story over and over and over. And then when I said we were doing chemo, people, again, well meaning, were like, oh, I would never give my partner chemo. That's poison. I would treat it naturally. Well, here's the thing. We had gone to a natural path before chemo started, and we were going to do all sorts of herbs and stuff like that. And the guy said they weren't expensive. He was just a fantastic guy, and he said, take these with chemo. It will help you with the side effects. So under no circumstances was he saying like natural path only kind of thing. But cancer care did not allow us to take the natural path route as well. They said, nope, it will interfere with his chemo.
Mm.
And so these well-meaning people are telling me, oh, you shouldn't do chemo and stuff like that. And other well-meaning people said, it, it was a struggle. And they would say, oh, um, my brother or my sister or my father had had cancer, and it lasted a year or stuff like that. And I know what they meant, but it was just like, that's not what I want to hear. And then I would say, oh, well, he's doing good on chemo. Oh, well, it will get worse. Again, not really what I want to hear. But I understand, like, when people don't know how. Oh, I could write a book on just what not to say to a cancer patient and their spouse. But I know they were well-meaning, but it was really difficult. If I had to go through it again, I would not tell so many people.
Mm.
And then we have a small cabin near Lac du Bonnie. And I remember purposely not telling too many people at our cabin because I just wanted to have like a place where I could just get away and just not talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was really hard. So
Yeah, because I've had the experience where I meet somebody who shares what they're going through, and then I just don't really even know what to say. Like, I don't know what to say. So, what do you think would have been helpful, if anything? Just people to
what was
say, I'm
helpful
sorry.
if you don't know what to say, just say, I'm thinking about you, I'm praying for you, stuff like that. Another really great thing is like, people were often asking, like, let me know if you need help. um,
Mm,
it is more helpful to actually say, hey, how about I cut your grass for you? Hey, how about I bring you a meal tomorrow?
yeah,
Like, kind of like specific things,
yeah,
because we'd be like, okay, and what are we supposed to say? Like, you know what
yeah,
I mean? So
yeah,
it is, I think it's more helpful, if possible, if you can say, hey, I'll babysit your kids, I'll walk your dog, I'll, like,
yeah.
stuff like that.
Actually be of
And
service.
yeah, and whatever plan they're doing for treatments, keep your opinion on it to yourself. That's the biggest advice I can give. Keep
That's
it to
very good.
yourself, because
Yeah,
we're doing the absolute best we can.
right,
And we were following doctor's advice. So
right.
yeah,
Mm,
that's what I would suggest. And I remember, people say, uh, why don't you come over for supper? These are the days it works for us this week. Like, helpful, not, oh, come over for supper sometime.
mm-hmm,
This is when it works for us this week. How about you? That
mm-hmm.
is probably the biggest thing I could say, which was like, okay, that's very helpful. How about Tuesday? Perfect.
Nice.
Instead of just being like, and I know I could have called and said, hey, how about we come over for supper? But how many people are going to do that, right?
Yeah,
But if you say, here are the days that work for me,
yeah.
so that kind of
Great,
stuff.
great. So in your story, where are we at? Like, the diagnosis of cancer,
Yeah.
gallstone came, and then what happened?
So he did really
Chemo.
well until his third round of chemo. And we wanted a break from chemo because it was starting to kick his butt. He was really tired. He never got really like nauseous too badly and stuff like that, but he was ridiculously tired. And so we wanted a break, but our oncologist said no, like, one more round, right? And so we agreed to it. Meanwhile, Ernie had said, I really would like to go to Paraguay and see all my siblings, right? His parents at this point were deceased, but he still had a lot of siblings there. Only one sister of his, Adina, lived here, but the rest were all in Paraguay. And the doctor's like, oh, no, no, that's too long of a trip. You can't, kind of thing. And we're like, okay, one more round of chemo. And that one really, really kicked his butt. And he started to get a lot of complications, including he started to get a little bit of a blood clot in one of his legs. So they put him on blood thinners. And oh my goodness, we just, this was December of 2017. In the meantime, um, a niece had, my niece Jenny, that I was so close to, had suggested that we join that church. And I said, well, I can't join a church because I haven't been baptized. And then she said, well, that can be changed. And then the very next week, I was new to church life, and my church announced baptism classes were starting. And I took that as a sign from God that it was my time to be baptized. And Ernie and I looked it up on his chemo schedule, and he was 2 weeks on chemo, 1 week off, and the baptism would be on his week off, so he'd be well enough to attend. So in the end, in November of that year, I ended up getting baptized at North Kildona Mennonite Church, and that church was extremely supportive and wonderful throughout that whole cancer journey of his. And so, yeah, I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to give away. I don't know if it really matters, but the last round of chemo, it didn't work. Cancer was now growing, even though it had been almost gone. But our vague oncologist, like, that's how he used it. Oh well, cancer's almost gone. Oh, it's back. It's growing. Like, but he never said exactly where. He never said. But we also didn't ask. And I was in super big time denial. And I was thinking, how can I ask? Like, I was starting to think, like, is he terminal or something? They never used the words terminal. They never said what stage he's in, nothing. And I felt like I should ask. I should ask. But how can I with him sitting beside me? How can I do that? I couldn't do it. I didn't have the strength to ask. And they didn't say. And so we were in denial. We were big time in denial. And then January 1st, our new year started off with me rushing him at 5 a.m. to the hospital, and his bile duct was having issues. It was getting, I guess, blocked by the cancer. Again, they were vague. We didn't really understand what was going on. And so most of January, he was in and out of the hospital, and his rock solid hemoglobin numbers plummeted, and he now had to have blood transfusions fairly often. And it was tough, to say the least. And then it was a Monday night. It was 2 days before his birthday, and we had an oncologist appointment the next day. And I said to just what was going on, and I said to Ernie, I think it's time we start asking some difficult questions. And he said, you're right. And I said, I think it's time we ask, like, if they think you're terminal or what's going on. And we had this wonderful moment, how we told each other how much we loved each other, and that all we have is each other, and we got through it before, and we'll get through it again. The next morning, day before his 52nd birthday, he was on the phone with his best friend, talking about a tree job coming up that they were going to cut down together or whatever. And he got off the phone, and I came out of the bathroom to tell him we were going to be leaving in 5 minutes for the appointment. And he was kind of oddly standing at the counter, kind of oddly placed. And I just said, what's with you? I said, as I walked by him, I said, what's with you? Don't you feel well? And he said, no, I'm fine. But he slurred his words. And I whipped my head around, and his mouth was lopsided. And I took his hand, and I led him to the couch, and I called 911. And he had a massive stroke, even though he was on blood thinners. But a few days before per the doctor's prescription thing, we were supposed to decrease the blood thinners for whatever reason, their thing. And I don't know if that caused it, but anyways, he had a massive stroke.
Hmm.
And that's when it really became difficult. I remember saying, like, last year was a picnic compared to this, because now
Wow.
you're in hospitals, and he spent his last 3 months in hospitals.
Hmm.
But because we lived outside of Winnipeg, only just outside of Winnipeg, like 10 minutes, we were in a different health region, and it caused us huge problems. And we were shuttled from hospital to hospital. And people will be shocked by this, but in one of the hospitals, we were denied palliative care because we didn't live in Winnipeg, even though we lived 10 minutes from Winnipeg. They said, well, you're supposed to be in Selkirk. That's your hospital. But we were in a different one. So we were denied.
Yeah.
So we had a difficult struggle with the medical system, as well as his cancer and his stroke. And then we were told in passing by a really, how do I word it? A really cruel doctor told me in passing that Ernie's cancer was terminal. And we had
Hmm.
never heard that word. And then he went and got, I was bawling my eyes out, and he went and got the oncologist report, and he says, he's been terminal since the beginning, and all that chemo was considered palliative. And I said, we would have never done that much. We would have gone to Paraguay.
Huh.
But
Wow.
we were not told. Later, my oncologist said, oh, I thought you understood, but that's a different story. But anyways, it was very traumatizing to be told in that way.
Hmm.
So he ended up passing in April of 2018.
Mm-hmm. So sorry for your loss. I know anyone who's ever loved, and especially as we age, Heather, like I'm in a 30-year marriage now and love my husband so, so, so much. Like just the thought of going through what you're going through brings me to tears, so I have very big compassion for you. Yeah.
Thank you. And so I was already struggling with turning to alcohol and prescription drugs when he was sick, although it was sort of under control because I had to drive at any given moment. So I, I kept the
That's a
drinking
good
under
thing.
control, and but I was like popping pills and to stop the shaking and stuff like that. So I was abusing both. I remember even hiding hiding alcohol in his closet at the hospital. And anyways, after he died, we didn't have children together. I am blessed to have two step children and a beautiful granddaughter named Lily, who is my love of my life. But we didn't have children together. And when he died, I, I felt like I lost everything. He was everything to me. And I turned to alcohol more and more to cope,
Mhm.
because it felt like it just didn't matter. It just didn't matter.
I want to hear him. I want to hear him say your name because you spell it differently in the book. How
So,
did it sound when he called your name?
so some Mennonites have struggled with th, so they can't say it. So he pronounced my name for 26 years, Header. He could never say it.
I love it.
And so that's why in the book, when he's saying my name, I always spell it with a D, because he could never say it. So it was Header, Header. So and I really struggled. Uh, Oh boy, did I struggle when he died. I did whatever I could to distract myself from my grief, even though I was in counseling and speaking to my pastor regularly. I turned to alcohol and I turned to drugs. I turned to, I immediately threw myself in a relationship. Um, and I did whatever I could to distract myself from my grief because I could not deal with it. I could not deal with it. And I went to, grief share. I did group counseling. I was doing all these things, but people were always like Heather, you always just say you're fine, and you're the only one that doesn't cry in these group therapy sessions, because I couldn't deal with it.
Mm.
And 5 years later, it can still be a struggle. But last year, 18 months ago, as of a couple days ago, I got sober. And I joined a 12-step program thing, and I met some amazing people, absolutely amazing people. Even though I was struggling to even think I had a problem with alcohol, but there I was in a 12-step program. Because I thought, there's no way I could be an alcoholic like my dad. Like, how is that possible? It's because I'd never drank. I don't think I drank the quantities that he did, but I was always turning to alcohol. Um, well, when I was lonely, when I was angry, when I was upset, when I was happy, you know. Anyways, but I came to realize that I did have a problem with alcohol, and yeah, I'm proud to say that I'm 18 months sober, and I had to go through. It was almost like going through it all again, like the first anniversary of his death, is his first birthday or whatever, because I was now having to do it sober. And before, I was just like, anniversary of his death, people were texting me, how are you doing? Like, I'm doing good, as I'm drinking, a couple glasses of wine, right? um and so I had to face that sober. So it was almost like I had to kind of go through it again, but feel it this time. I had to feel the loss. And it was tough. It was really tough getting through all those things, again. But I'm really pleased that that I'm sober, and I'm doing what I can to try to make Ernie proud of me,
Mm.
because I made a lot of mistakes in in the early days after he died. I made a lot of mistakes. I would do things so differently,
Mm.
but it's how I coped.
Mhm.
It's how I coped. And then, because I had written all these journals, and when he got diagnosed, I was actually in the middle of a writing class, because I've always liked creative writing. And I met these lovely, lovely group of ladies, and we were in a writing class together. And we continued having, like a little book group meetings and stuff like that. And any story I wrote, it was always about Ernie and our life. And I thought, I have to write this. I have to write this.
Mm.
And it's raw, because it's straight. A lot of it's straight from my journals,
Mhm.
and it's sometimes can be a difficult read.
Mhm.
Doesn't have a happy ending, but I felt like if it can help one person, then it's worth it, right? And so I continued with the writing classes. COVID interrupted a fair bit, and so during COVID, when there was nothing else to do, So what I did, because these were all handwritten journals, I had to, and I'm a poor typist, with me and technology, right? What I did was I dictated the journals to myself. So
Mm.
I dictated 10 really thick journals to myself,
Mm.
which meant I had to say out loud like every word, which was extremely difficult, um, but also therapeutic.
Mm.
And then I started really working on getting my book together, and had had these group of lovely ladies helping me and supporting me, and yeah, and I'm proud to say last year I managed to get it published,
Mm.
and I never thought I would say words like that out loud, that I published a book. And
Uh, so can you share? We have a few minutes left, and I think there's a book in everybody, and so can you share a little bit about your publishing experience and what you did, how that happened?
Yes. Okay. So what I did was I ended up taking a course, happened to be at a senior center, even though I wasn't a senior, and I took this course about writing your life story, and I took it with Wilma Dirksen was the teacher, and she has a small publishing company for like self-publishing generally. And so she helped me tremendously with getting me set up with an editor and a copy editor, and getting the book cover made and stuff like that.
Mm.
So I did use like a publishing company to help me with all sorts of that
Mm.
stuff, and then I put it on Amazon myself, well, with help.
Mm.
And yeah, it seems overwhelming and daunting, but it really isn't once you kind of know what you're doing. And so I did self-publish and put it on Amazon, because it's very difficult to be an unknown author, to be published like through a
Yeah.
traditional publisher. It's extremely difficult, and could maybe take years or maybe never even
So
happen, right? So I
what were
really
the
wanted my book out.
Yeah. What were the costs associated with the publishing for you? Like, what kind of an investment did you have to make?
It wasn't too expensive. I don't remember the exact costs, but it was probably a bit over 1,000 for the publishing company.
Mm.
It wasn't too bad, actually, and I'm proud to say I've broken even now. I
Yeah,
haven't
good for you.
I haven't sold too many copies to people that don't know me, but pretty much everyone that knows me, bought their my book to support me and stuff. But it is difficult being a self-published author, because I don't know how to promote myself. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, like
Yeah.
that's why I'm so excited that you had me on your show.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it can be a daunting task, but I kind of think like everybody has a story to tell,
Yeah.
and it can be done. Like
Yeah.
if I can do it, that means.
And you're so brave. Like, you're so brave to do this. And I just really admire you. Like, personally, I've wanted to write a book for years, and so many people tell me I must hear that many times a year. You should write a book. And I'm like, yeah, but. So look at you go. I'm just so proud of you. It's just you're so brave
Oh,
and
thank you. I
happy to
can help. I can help you.
have. Oops. I also wanted to share that a friend of mine, Lynn, we went to law school together 30 years ago. She's listening, and she said I can really relate both with my own cancer journey and my husband. So yeah, so she's really thanking you for sharing your story like this. And I knew it would touch people because many people are touched by this horrible disease. And then your openness about sharing how you cope, you know.
Yeah, and I have a Facebook page just for the book, and in a coincidence, um, a doctor in a different province ended up reading my book, and he said it was really good to hear um, from the other side of the desk,
Mm,
the patient's point of view. And he said, I can see what went right with this case, what went wrong. And yeah, it was really interesting to get some feedback from a doctor, that's for
yeah.
sure. And just so everyone is clear, um, all doctors, nurses' names have been changed in the book. Everybody else's names are the same, but I did change all doctors' names.
Mhm.
So I would not, you know, and I'm brutally honest about how it went down with the whole medical system. I was really angry in the beginning, mostly at doctors, because you had to be angry at someone, right? But I do understand they did their absolute best. Gallbladder cancer, I wasn't aware of this, is extremely difficult, and there's like about 10% chance of survival type thing.
Mm,
If Ernie hadn't had a stroke, he might have lasted another year or two, maybe.
mm,
So, yeah, but I do know that they did their best, and the actual, you know, his actual medical care was good. It was just a lot of these protocols and policies, and then bedside manner of
mhm.
some doctors. There were some fabulous ones, but most were either so vague you didn't know what they were talking about, or like so brutally honest you were like having a nervous breakdown. So
Yeah.
there needs to be something in between.
So, um, time flies. I like to end right on time. I've learned that from our 12-step recovery. I like to start on time, end on time.
That's
And
for sure.
so, you have a few minutes here to just say any closing thoughts or whatever, and then I'm just going to have some closing thoughts.
um my closing thoughts are just I want to stress how much help I got from family and friends and my church, my counselor. I mean, it sounded like I was complaining before about some insensitive things people might have said, but mostly I had a tremendous amount of support from a lot of people, and I
Mhm,
will always be grateful for that. And
mhm,
even the medical system, like I said, they did their best. And the good thing that did come out of this is I found my way back to God,
mhm,
and in the very end, found sobriety as well. But so there are some good things that can
mhm.
come out of some absolutely
Yeah,
horrible, difficult experiences.
right on. Thank you. So again, thank you for agreeing to be a guest. It's really a pleasure to have had you, and I'm going to finish reading your book. I hope that can you hear that horrible echo? Because I can hear an echo. No?
I can't. I hope the audience didn't.
I don't know. Anyway, there's a horrible echo on one side. So I love laughing as well, as I know you do because we're becoming friends. And when I started the podcast, I knew some of the things we would talk about would be quite serious, but then I also love life, and it's so good to laugh. And so I said, I know one thing for sure. Brave Indigenous Conversations is all about the earrings. So these earrings that I'm wearing today, I may have featured them already. They're becoming a favorite pair. They were made by Barb Fayant. She's a Métis woman in Whitehorse, and these are semi like stones. Like I believe they're because turquoise comes in a range of colors, from like this color to bright blue, like your shirt, or green, turquoise green. So they're a beautiful stone, and then this is a piece of fox hair, and yeah, I love them. So I just
Cool.
wanted to thank Barb for her beautiful work, and you can find her on Facebook. And then I also wanted to share with listeners that once I pay, cost me whatever. I pay a tech guy to listen to the podcast and put timestamps for people where if they want to just speak through different issues. And he will also find the Amazon link for your book, and he will put it in the notes. And he will also find your Facebook page, and we'll put that in the notes as well.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. All
Thank
right.
you.
I'm going to end the broadcast, and then you and I can visit.
Thanks.